My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old. And the last thing my father said to me before that Christmas was that the family didn't have room for me at the lake house this year. He didn't say it with anger. He said it the way he used to read the closing numbers on a spreadsheet, flat, final, already filed away. We're keeping it small this year, Rach. Family only. As if I hadn't grown up catching fireflies on that dock. As if I hadn't scattered my mother's ashes off the end of it 4 years earlier. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that he'd already mailed out 31 engraved cards, gold foil on navy stock, to every branch of our family, every cousin I'd shared a bunk bed with, every aunt who'd taught me to water ski. 31 invitations, and not one of them had my name on it. Not an oversight. A decision. I didn't find out until my Uncle Walt called me on the Sunday before Christmas, his voice carrying that careful weight meant his age reserved for things they don't know how to say out loud. He'd gotten his card. He'd read the guest list printed on the inside flap, all 14 people who'd be at the lake house in 5 days. He'd read it twice. Then he called me. Rachel, he said, why isn't your name on this thing? That question is the reason I'm telling you this story. Hold on to it. I'll come back to it, but not yet. First you need to understand what that guest list actually was, and what it cost to be left off it. If you've ever been the one your family quietly wrote out of the picture while everyone else smiled for it, stay with me. Now come back to 9 years ago. I was 25, back in Michigan for a long weekend, and I made the mistake of coming downstairs early on a Saturday morning. My father was at the kitchen island with his laptop open and a folder of papers beside it, and spread across the granite was something I recognized without being able to name, a title report. The kind with a raised seal and a surveyor's stamp in the corner. It was my grandmother Vera's property. The lake house on Wixom Lake, where every summer of my childhood had happened. I poured coffee and asked what he was working on. He glanced up at me with an expression I'd spend the next 9 years learning to translate correctly. At the time I read it as tired. Now I understand it was calculating. Just some estate stuff, he said. Go see if your brother's up. My brother Colin is 3 years older than me. He has my father's jaw and my father's ease in a room, the specific gravity of someone who has never once doubted he belonged wherever he was standing. I loved him the uncomplicated way you love a sibling before you're required to look at them closely. I went and woke Colin. I didn't ask again about the papers. That, I understand now, was the first thread I should have pulled. The quiet ones always notice. They just decide not to say anything yet. Hold that thought. First you need to know about the lake house. Grandma Vera had owned it outright for 38 years. 3 bedrooms, a screened porch that sagged a little on the west end, a boathouse we used as a garage for the golf cart, and just under 2 acres running down to the water. My grandfather Hank, everyone called him Hank, even his grandkids, had rebuilt that porch the summer I was 9, and I'd handed him screws from a coffee can for 4 Saturdays straight while he told me, unprompted, that a house is a living thing. It tells you what it needs if you're paying attention. Hank and Vera had talked for years about what would happen to the lake house eventually. They talked about it the way people talk about things they assume everyone already understands. No formal paperwork, no lawyer in the room, just the reasonable belief that the people around them had been listening. The lake house would stay in the family. It would go to their kids, and their kids' kids after that. It wasn't an asset. It was a place. My father, it turned out, had a different definition of that word. Which brings us to the year I was 31. Vera had a fall in the driveway that October, broke her hip, and while she recovered, the woman who came home from rehab moved through the world differently than the woman who'd gone in. Slower. A little uncertain some mornings about what day it was. But she was still herself where it mattered. She still called me on my birthday before anyone else did. She still kept the coffee can of screws on the porch shelf. She just needed help. My father volunteered immediately. Generously. With the kind of visible selflessness that announces itself walking through the door. He drove her to appointments. He managed her medications. He took over her calendar and, eventually, her finances, and became, over about 16 months, the person everyone deferred to on anything involving Grandma Vera's care. He was good at it. I say that without resentment. It's just true. What I didn't know was that during those 16 months, my father had also become the manager of something else. Vera had signed a power of attorney, reasonable, necessary, meant to be temporary. And my father used that authority to quietly start meeting with an estate attorney about the lake house's title. Not to protect it. To simplify it. There's a difference between those two words that I wouldn't understand for another 3 years. Now come back to 2 years ago. Vera passed in late winter. She was 81, and she went peacefully at the lake house, in the bedroom with the window that looked out over the dock. Hank was beside her. The family filled the house within a day, that particular noise of grief, everyone needing something, everyone in everyone else's way, everyone performing loss in whatever key came naturally to them. My father moved through it with the calm of a man who'd already finished the paperwork of mourning before the morning arrived. The will reading was 10 days later, in a conference room above a bank branch in Midland, Michigan. I'll describe the room because the room matters. Fluorescent lights, a table too long for the 6 chairs pulled up to it, and a framed print of sailboats nobody had looked at directly in at least 2 decades. There were 7 of us, Hank, my father, my Aunt Denise and her husband, my cousins Jenna and Marcus, and me. The attorney, a man named Fitch, with the kind of reading glasses that slide down on purpose, sat at the head with a folder and the unhurried air of someone who does this every week. He read the will. The lake house went jointly to my father and Aunt Denise, which surprised no one. The personal property was divided out thoughtfully, and Hank was provided for. What surprised everyone, what made Aunt Denise's husband set down his coffee cup with a sound like a sentence that doesn't finish, was the codicil. Attached to the main will was a document dated the year I was 31. It established a family use restriction on the lake house. The property could not be sold without unanimous written consent from all of Vera's living adult grandchildren. There were 4 of us, Colin, Jenna, Marcus, and me. My father hadn't known about the codicil. He didn't move when Fitch read it aloud. But his hand, resting flat on the table, closed slowly into something that wasn't quite a fist. That's the detail I keep coming back to. Not the words. His hand. You already know where this is going, don't you? Which brings us to the 7 months between that will reading and the Christmas I wasn't invited to. In those 7 months I learned things. Not all at once, more the way you notice a water stain spreading on a ceiling. One ring, then another, then a third, and then you realize the rings have been there for a while and you've just been looking at the ceiling wrong. Item 1, my father listed the Wixom Lake house with a realtor 9 weeks after the will reading. He didn't tell Hank. He told Colin, who told no one, and he never contacted Jenna, Marcus, or me. Item 2, a buyer had already come in. Not a family member, a hospitality group out of Grand Rapids that converts lakefront property into short-term rental units. Their opening offer was $540,000. My father countered at $565,000. This happened before Vera had been in the ground 4 weeks. Item 3, the codicil required unanimous consent from all 4 grandchildren. My father called Jenna and Marcus, who both lived out of state and trusted his handling of family business the way you trust someone who's given you no reason not to. Each of them signed a document he described as closing out Grandma's estate paperwork. Neither read it closely enough to understand they'd just consented to the sale. Item 4, he never contacted me. No call. No email. No document. He simply waited, and I think he'd decided, in the same quiet efficiency of a man who'd been planning this since a Saturday morning 9 years earlier, that my silence could be manufactured if I was never given the chance to speak. It wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. Stay with me. There's something that almost surfaced 2 months before Christmas, and then didn't. Jenna called me in October. She'd been visiting her folks in Ohio and mentioned the lake house in passing, and Marcus's father, my Uncle Walt, had given her a look she couldn't place. He'd said, "Your uncle's got that handled." and changed the subject. Jenna called me that night because the look had bothered her in a way she couldn't explain. Like he knew something was off, she said, but decided it wasn't his business. I knew that look. I'd grown up watching it. We talked for almost an hour. She told me about the paperwork she'd signed. I told her what I'd pieced together from the listing I'd found online myself, not because my father told me, but because I'd been doing, quietly and without hurrying, what Hank once taught me to do with a house that wasn't saying what it needed out loud. I'd been listening. Jenna went quiet for a second. He needed all four of us, she said. Yes. And he never contacted you? No. So the sale isn't valid. I let that sentence sit in the air between us, the way you let a tool rest on a workbench before you pick it up. I haven't decided what to do with it yet, I told her. And I meant it, because the lake house mattered, sure, but what I was still trying to understand was the thing underneath the sale. The reason my name had been quietly filed out of this family's machinery, like a line item that had been audited and found unnecessary. That understanding arrived on the Sunday before Christmas, when Uncle Walt called and asked why my name wasn't on the list. I need to tell you what he said carefully, because his words are the hinge everything turns on. He's 79. He'd lost his sister-in-law 7 months earlier, watched his own brother go quiet in a way that worried him. He'd received a gold foil card inviting him to his brother's Christmas at the lake, read every name printed on the flap, and noticed the one that was missing. Rachel, he said, why isn't your name on this thing? I told him I didn't know. Then I stopped, because that wasn't true, and he'd know it wasn't true, and we'd never talked to each other any other way. So I told him the truth instead. I told him about the listing. I told him about the unsigned consent. I told him about October, and Jenna, and the document 3 of 4 grandkids had signed while 1 hadn't. I told him about a Saturday morning 9 years earlier when a 25-year-old walked into a kitchen and saw a title report and was told to go wake her brother. Walt didn't speak for almost a full minute. Then, you've been sitting on that for 7 months. I was trying to understand all of it first. Has anything closed? Has the sale gone through? No. It can't. Not legally. Not without my signature. Another silence. Then he said, I'll see you Thursday. Not at your dad's table. At mine. Here's the part I've never said out loud before. In the 4 days between that call and Christmas, my father called me once. Not to invite me. Not to explain. He called because Walt had called him first, and whatever Walt said, its effect was that my father picked up the phone and told me, in the voice he used for things that were unpleasant but necessary, that maybe he'd been hasty. That of course I was welcome to come. Not an apology. A correction of strategy. I told him I appreciated the call and that I already had plans. He asked what plans. I'm having Christmas with Uncle Walt, I said. He was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted them. Then, he doesn't have room for that. He said he does, I said. Rachel, I think you're turning this into something it isn't. I let the sentence finish. I let the silence hold it. Dad, I said, I need you to know I haven't signed anything. And I ended the call. Now come back to Christmas Day. Walt lives about 35 minutes from Wixom Lake in a smaller place in town he moved to after his own wife passed a few years back. Close enough to help. Far enough to have his own walls. His kitchen is small and plain and always smells faintly of wood smoke, because he still runs a real fireplace instead of the gas insert everyone else switched to. He'd made a ham, not a big one, just enough. He'd called Jenna, and she'd driven 3 hours up from Ohio for a dinner that hadn't existed 4 days earlier. He'd called Marcus, who couldn't make it but sent a voicemail that Walt played off his phone and set on the counter while we ate, exactly the kind of thing my uncle would do, and I can't describe it without using the word grace. He'd set the table with my grandmother's good china, the pattern with the small holly berries around the rim, the one she only used twice a year. 4 plates. 4 sets of silverware. And in the center of the table, a photograph none of us had seen before, the lake house, shot from the far end of the dock, so you could see the porch and the boathouse and the water beyond it. A July photograph. The sky was that specific blue that only exists in childhood summers. He'd found it going through various things. He put it on the table because he wanted us looking at it while we ate. Nobody mentioned the sale. Nobody mentioned the consent forms or the realtor or the hospitality group out of Grand Rapids. We ate, and talked about small things, and Walt told a story about the summer they reshingled the boathouse roof that I'd never heard before, and Jenna laughed at exactly the right moment, and the afternoon moved through itself slowly, without any urgency at all. After dinner, while Jenna did the dishes, Walt and I sat on his back steps with our coffee, the cold doing its quiet work around us. He was quiet a while. I was quiet with him. Then he said, "Your grandmother knew." I looked at him. "Knew what your dad was planning," he said. "Not when she wrote that codicil, at the time she just wanted the house protected. But eventually, near the end, she knew. She didn't come out and say it. What she said was," he stopped, thought about it, "she said a house can survive a bad winter. What it can't survive is being sold to somebody who never learned it." He looked down at his cup. She wasn't just talking about the house. I understand now what I didn't then. The codicil was never really about the lake house. It was about me. It was Vera's way of leaving a key on the table, making sure that no matter what decisions got made in rooms I wasn't invited into, there was one room where my name still had to appear. Where my signature had to be present. Where I couldn't quietly be removed from the list. Here's the part one haven't told anyone until now. The Friday after Christmas, I called Fitch, the attorney from the will reading. I told him I'd become aware of consent paperwork that had been circulated among the grandchildren, and that I had never received, reviewed, or signed any such document. I told him I wanted the estate file to reflect that accurately. He confirmed it. He also confirmed, carefully, in the way people who've spent a career protecting themselves with language tend to speak, that without unanimous consent, any sale based on the existing paperwork would be legally void. The buyer walked away 5 weeks later. The lake house is still in the family. My father and I have spoken 3 times since that Christmas. Each conversation has been its own kind of weather, not a storm, not quite clear skies either. Something still deciding what it wants to be. I haven't given him a speech. I haven't laid out an itemized account of what he did and what it cost, the way some part of me still wants to. I could have. There were moments I almost did. But I have Hank's way of understanding that a house tells you what it needs if you're willing to listen, and what this one needed wasn't noise. The last time we talked, he said, "I hope someday you'll understand that everything I did for this family." "I know you believe that," I said. And I meant it. I genuinely think he believes it. The most dangerous people in a family are rarely the ones who know they're causing harm. They're the ones who built a version of events where everything they took was actually given, and everything they erased was simply forgotten. What they're counting on is that the quiet ones won't keep the receipts. Last month, Jenna and Marcus and I drove up to Wixom Lake together. Nothing official. No papers, no meeting. We went because the house needed a winter check, the gutters, a soft spot on the boathouse roof Hank had flagged, the kind of maintenance a house asks for without ever raising its voice. We spent a Saturday doing what needed doing, then ate lunch on the porch in our coats, because the sag on the west end had finally been fixed years ago and it was level enough now to sit on comfortably. The water was still. The boathouse held. The coffee can of screws was still sitting on the porch shelf, right where Hank had always kept it. I picked it up, turned it once in my hands, and set it back down. Some things stay in place because somebody decides they should. Not because it was easy. Not because no one ever tried to move them. If you made it this far, you already know this story mattered to you, so like this video, subscribe for more stories like it, and tell me in the comments, would you have done what Rachel did?